Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Is Your Data Holding Back Your AI? And Here's How to Fix It. That was some vibey elevator music. Loved
Yeah, I was
it.
feeling it.
My name is Alicia Harper. I'm a technical PMM here at Retool, and today we're sitting down with Sam Garfield, a staff analytics and data engineer at Retool. And we're going to have just a candid conversation about some of the messy realities of making your data work for AI and some of the practical steps to get you there. So whether you're an IC or a data leader or just interested in this really cool intersection of data and AI, I hope you guys can all walk away with more confidence about your data strategy and hopefully have some concrete next steps that you can take back to your team and initiatives. So before we jump in, a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is recorded, so we are going to send a recording to everyone at the end of the session. And we're also going to hold a Q&A afterwards with Sam, so please share your questions in the Q&A feature down in Zoom. And if you're having any technical difficulties, please reach out to Daniel Kim, who I see just sent you guys a little welcome. So, Sam, you ready? Can we get started?
Absolutely.
Okay. So before we jump in, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Like, what was your journey into data analytics? What drew you into this field?
Yeah. So I actually was really interested in data in university, but I hadn't really done the prep work to, major in a degree that would get me a job in data, or at least so I thought at the time. But I ended up studying economics, where I took as many applied stats classes as possible. And then after college, I actually became a high school teacher. But between school years, I needed something to do over the summer to make some extra money. And I got an internship at Rocket Mortgage on the data analytics team. And by the end of the summer, it was like, this is what I want to do. Um, Never want to, and switch careers from there. So this is my 14th year in data.
Wow. But you've always had your head in statistics and analytics, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I've also seen you described as someone who is always willing to tread the unknown territory, which lines up with your history. What role do you kind of see yourself or other data teams playing in this new AI territory?
Yeah. We'll get into much more detail later, probably. But, the bottleneck for getting value out of AI at your in the enterprise or nonprofit or wherever you're trying to do it is usually actually the data, not like the models or the prompt engineering. And so there's an opportunity for data teams to really like seize the opportunity and like, open up that bottleneck and make AI something that the enterprise gets value from.
Was there a moment that you kind of realized AI was this next challenge you wanted to take on, or was it just a personal interest, or did it come from a business challenge that you needed to solve?
Yeah, it's something that has been a part of my career and interest for a long time. I'd say something, the general theme of algorithms and how data relates to algorithms. I got my start doing econometric forecasting, which is about algorithms. But then, after university, started working in data. I spent a while as like a statistician and or a machine learning engineer. Um, and I've seen, how algorithms can add value or create risks. And that only kind of increased with the advent of LLMs, which are kind of a new category of system. So, I've been cautiously optimistic and interested. I'd say it's in the last year and a half that I really became convinced that there's a lot of value there from LLMs that's waiting to be realized.
Interesting. It's interesting that you were in ML and then you're now kind of seeing the adoption of AI at a more high level, greater scale.
Yeah. Yeah, seen similar commoditization, like democratization, like we had with ML over time as well.
Yes. And with that comes a lot of challenges in adopting that. So we want to
Yeah,
dive into the deeper questions. I know like it seems like everyone is dealing with like data connectivity issues nowadays. Data lives everywhere. It's in spreadsheets, it's in warehouses, it's in other business softwares. What actually happens to AI when your data is scattered like that? And are there steps you can take to start fixing that?
yeah. So, actually, a friend of mine who may be in the audience, he said something that I stole and will now steal from him, which is that there's no AI without IA. IA standing for information architecture. Um, and what that means is, like I said earlier, the bottleneck isn't generally the models or the prompts, it's the data, because you need information and data in order to get value out of the LLM that's specific to the task you're trying to accomplish or your business. And the process of architecting that data so that it's accessible and consumable by an LLM is not always super straightforward. So I think when you have data that's scattered, it has a couple impacts on AI and AI in the enterprise. So one is it makes development or like reaching business value much slower. It's much easier to rapidly develop valuable AI applications that have business context if you have a well-defined set of data or small number of resources to connect to understand what data is available for answering a question or exploring a domain. Um, this is, probably even more true the more advanced the AI application you have is. So, for example, the most basic level might be like a enterprise GPT instance that has access to your internal documents. But if you are building an AI agent that you expect to like take some action on your behalf, those agents need to be able to efficiently fetch and analyze data as needed to make decisions on your behalf. And the better the data is, the better the decisions it'll make. Um, I think it's also, it also exacerbates one of the biggest risks, I think, from enterprise data, which is debugging when things go wrong or even identifying when things go wrong. The more kind of data sources you have to worry about, the more places there are for failures to occur, the more likely it is that you aren't going to have the right instrumentation or observability in place to identify when, something changed and now your LLM or your agent is making erroneous decisions. Like, we've seen some outcomes like agents giving people imaginary coupons that don't exist for discounts on the company's products, for example. Um, I think the most straightforward solution, at least on its face, is to centralize your data sources into as few places as possible. So one way of approaching that is a traditional data warehouse where you can take in raw data from a variety of sources, then you can clean it, transform it, maintain it, and monitor it all in one place, and then serve that to an LLM or an agent. This is particularly useful for, if you want to have context, broad business context. You want to know like what are the trends in the business recently or for across customers.
Right.
But you can also use solutions like Retool that allow you to connect to different data sources in one place, and then standardize your governance, your access policies as well. Or even better, you can combine the two um, and get even better governance.
Right. So I guess we're hearing a lot about data using enterprise data. It's probably security is a really, really, really top thing of mind. Is there anything that you think teams should consider when adopting AI and unifying their data and getting an AI ready data ecosystem?
Yeah, uh, this is a big, it's a big question. Um, So I think I'm a big first principles guy. I like to think in terms of, what are the first principles that you need to understand a system or make good decisions about a system. And I'd say the key principle for AI, or is two. One is AI is not a destination, it's a tool. You aren't just generically AI ready. You have to have a sense of what are we trying to accomplish with our AI applications. And usually it's best to start with a relatively narrow range of applications so that you can make sure you stick the landing. The other key principle, I think, is a phrase that I'll steal from one of my favorite writers, Max Reed, which is epistemic humility. So what that means is there's two kinds of epistemic humility. In other words, being careful about, being overconfident about what you know. If you have epistemic humility, you assume that you don't know a lot of things. So you have to have humility, about what what do these LLMs, these systems know? What can they know? How correctly do they interpret information I provide them? And then two, you have to have humility about what you yourself understand about how the system behaves. These are highly complicated systems. Even the foundation model developers like OpenAI don't have great tools for understanding what's happening under the hood. Um, and so another way of framing that I've mentioned in other places is to think of the AI as like a well-meaning CFO or even CEO who is like reasonably proficient with SQL. They can write like pretty basic queries. They can follow a link to documentation to understand the data. They can even look at examples to get a sense for how the data is related to each other, how people have solved problems in the past. But you wouldn't just like expect your CEO to understand all of the nuance of every aspect of your business or to dive deep into really complicated, convoluted data models and kind of come up with correct answers by writing their own SQL. Um, yeah, I think what that means in practice is that to be AI ready, you have to have a number of facets to your data. So one is, unified data, ideally, which we kind of discussed above. Making sure it's easy for you to manage, observe, transform, document it all in one place. Another aspect is data governance, which helps you, make sure that you control access to data at scale. One of the most dangerous things about LLMs potentially is regulatory risks. If imagine, LLM has access to private data it shouldn't have, or exposes private data to end users. One of the best ways to mitigate those risks is to have good governance and systems that you can use to manage access and revoke it where needed and appropriate. You also need to have quality. It's kind of the importance of the quality of your data is higher than ever because an LLM, it's unlikely to look at the result and say, huh, that doesn't align with my understanding of how the business works. This metric clearly is incorrect. And so you really need to have a human in the loop somewhere who's notified when there are problems so that you can intervene when an AI system is like drawing incorrect conclusions. And then finally, documentation. It's been said that the most valuable thing that a software engineer can do at this point, if you believe that in the advent of AI-powered coding, the most valuable thing a software engineer can do is document their code rather than write it. And I think the same is true for both the code that data engineers or analytics engineers or data teams own, but even more so the data itself. If a LLM has access to really high quality documentation to understand the data, then it can make really good decisions about how to use it.
Right. That makes sense. So I guess can we talk a little bit about unstructured data and how that can interact with AI?
Yeah. So unstructured data is really interesting because there's this tension at the heart of LLMs and getting value out of unstructured data through LLMs. So on the one hand, the highest value add that an LLM can provide is by automating the labor of getting insights from unstructured data. LLMs can make things possible that were never possible before in terms of crawling through and summarizing huge reams of information. On the other hand, however, the more extraneous information you throw at an LLM, the worse it performs on a given task. So these two things are in sometimes extreme tension, in practice, especially if you're trying to develop very high reliability business applications. So in practice, I usually have to do, especially if it's really large unstructured data, is to walk a kind of a tightrope between these two aspects of the tension. So one, you know, you should generally experiment with extracting key pieces of information from the unstructured data. So one example might be, if you're building applications off of AI summaries of call transcripts, you might want to pre-extract information from the transcript, like key topics that were mentioned, or the which of the speakers are from within your company or are not within your company. Um, you also want to try to generally transform the data that you expose into a more LLM friendly format. So for example, like a vector store is going to make it the LM can load more context into its memory at once and access it more efficiently. And then finally, I've found working on similar problems where we get insights from unstructured data at scale. It's really useful to provide an LLM with very clear examples and particularly good, well-documented data. Because it helps the LLM make sure it doesn't get overloaded in the barrage of unstructured data, and kind of interpret it correctly.
So it's almost like you're building this ETL, but now it's specifically for LLMs and giving it the right context that it needs.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Sometimes you can build an ETL for both humans and LLMs, but sometimes you just need to build one for the LLMs.
We serve the LLMs nowadays.
Yeah,
Okay, so I want to go back to that centralized data warehouse topic that we kind of talked about. I know this sounds like the ideal state. Um, Obviously, ideal state, but not all teams are maybe able to iterate that quickly, or maybe they're just working with a lot of different APIs like Zendesk or Salesforce or whatever. The tech ecosystem's insane nowadays. But do you have any advice on teams that are still either working to centralize their
yeah,
warehouses?
yeah. So I think the key principle here is that you need to identify what are the aspects of our data that we need to have the most confidence in, that we need to be the most reliable in order to build the applications that we need. When you're working on centralizing your data, there's a million things to do, and you really need to prioritize. So again, thinking about what is the end state we're trying to achieve, and for example, like if your end state is starting by creating a support chatbot, that's going to have you prioritize very different data sources than if your first application is going to be a sales analysis agent or something. So you don't necessarily even need to store everything in one place, but you need to be able to trust your data. So you can find other ways of creating governance and data quality checks around that data. It's hard to talk in too abstract of terms because it really depends on the data source, what's available. So, for example, Salesforce might have way more tools to help you do that than, say, some other integration. So I'd also say that it's worth noting that if you want to build high quality agent applications that really take action on your behalf, integrating directly with external systems is actually a key aspect of that. So you might actually be helping yourself out, get a boost up on developing good agents that can write to or take actions in external systems by setting up those connections early. You just need to make sure that they're reliable and well governed.
Right. So kind of having everything under one hood, one platform can be really helpful in getting started with AI and giving it that whole
Yeah.
ecosystem. So,
Yeah, it's worth noting, Retool can be a very useful tool in this situation because even if you don't have something like centralized data warehouse, Retool's connection library and query library can be used as ways to, um, quickly develop more of that governance and centralization.
right. With yeah, right. Security is kind of part of the platform is big as well.
Yeah,
Speaking of agents, like have you worked with agents? Can you kind of describe and tell the audience what some of the key characteristics of an agent is and why having this AI ready data is really important?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I worked on the launch for Retool's AI agent product actually. So I think I'm at least somewhat familiar with agents. But yeah, so I think the key idea is that um, agents are types of AI applications that can act. And, you know, potentially there's potential for agents to be kind of like one of the keys to unlocking enterprise AI value. Because if you set it up so that AIs can act safely and securely, you can really unlock all sorts of new possibilities. You can really make a lot of people's jobs easier, automate more types of tasks, that kind of thing. So let's say, in my view, an agent has several aspects that make it separate from like a regular LLM. Usually, an agent, it's a particular interface to an LLM that runs on a special server. There's several aspects. One is going to have some kind of goal orientation. So, you tell the agent what it must accomplish before it finishes executing, whether that's resolving a support ticket or finishing going through some decision tree. Two, it needs to have reasoning capabilities for it to make decisions, including when to terminate its process. Three, it needs to have tools, which are the ability to ask the server it's running on to run code for it. And that includes fetching data from external sources or, say, writing post commands that hit an external API or writing data to another database. So, for example, if you're creating a customer support automation bot, it might need the ability to write to your Zendesk to update the status of a ticket. Fourth, I think agents need knowledge and memory. They need the ability to fetch information to help them make a decision using their reasoning capabilities. And in some cases, they need the ability to store information permanently so that future agent runs can then reference that information. And then finally, you need an evaluation framework. So you can test different prompts and different models and identify which ones are most efficient or effective at accomplishing the task you need, um, and which ones are most cost effective at accomplishing the task. Now, tools, knowledge, and memory all depend potentially in some part on having AI ready data. So tools, knowledge is functionally a special kind of tool, right? It's a tool that you provide the LLM that allows it to fetch information that helps it make a decision. If you don't have well organized, centralized, well governed data, the effectiveness of the tools that you can provide your agent to build knowledge are much more limited. Um, so again, in Retool, for example, you can kind of help manage this better by using our connectors and query libraries, but you can also centralize your data in a data warehouse that makes it easier to write concise queries that fetch the exact information that an agent needs to make a decision. Um, but it's also easier to create effective and safe tools if the data is well governed. So again, if you're talking about an AI system that takes actions on your behalf, believe it or not, there's some companies that are even, have configured agents to have access to Stripe to make refunds or payments automatically. You really want to make sure that the data that's being used to make that decision is extremely well governed and looked at very closely. And then, memory can be related to the data team's work as well, whether that's, storing information that an agent needs for future reference in a vector store or a database you maintain. Um, Again, worth noting Retool, you get Retool DB, Retool Vector Store for free, which is one of the reasons why I've done a lot of my, AI work in Retool. Um, and then finally, evals can also integrate into kind of how a data team works. Ideally, what you want to do is track, your evaluations for your agents over time, so you detect drift from the original performance, and then can take corrective action as needed.
Right. It's a bit of an experimentation almost. Um, Also,
Yes.
yeah, you've really been at the forefront of a lot of these you've introduced a lot of AI solutions even to Retool itself as a company. Um, do you think that like you being a data expert, being on this data team, do you find that you're best positioned to lead this change?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously I'm biased. Um, but as I said earlier, there's no AI without IA, information architecture. The bottleneck generally is the data and the context you're able to feed the LLM. So given that, I see data teams kind of across the world are really like they're sitting at the mouth of this bottleneck that's kind of preventing the realization of AI value in the enterprise. And so, data teams, particularly if they can upskill, adopt tools that empower them to kind of translate their data expertise into AI applications, they can really seize the opportunity and kind of open up that bottleneck and have a lot more influence within the enterprise and a lot more impact. So yes, but I'm biased.
Right. I mean, well, we are seeing a lot of companies adopting AI, but I know that there's a challenge in actually getting to a mature point with AI. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I mean, well, I've seen your apps. So can you actually walk me through one of these AI powered applications, this like actual mature AI solution that you've managed to come up with while using Retool as a platform to do it?
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I wish I could talk about all of them. Some of them, kind of under NDA, given some of the cool stuff I'm working on. But one example would be we really, throughout my time at Retool, we really developed and spent a lot of time working on developing the enterprise's ability to find the data that someone needs for an application. Um, we didn't have a professional data team until the company was like 4 years old or something like that. So there's a lot of data. It's very hard to figure out if what you need is there and where it is. We had an existing application, a Retool application. Uh, you know, One of the best things at Retool can build front ends really quickly and cheaply. We had an application that was a data search tool. And it allowed people to search through the data in our Unity catalog, which is Databricks system for kind of managing metadata about your data warehouse to see if you could find tables that matched the use case you're looking for. What I realized is that we could actually unlock new types of searches by turning it into a RAG app. RAG standing for Recall Augmented Generation, where you fetch data in real time, feed it to an LLM, and have it help you make some decision. So what I did is I set it up so that the user could enter a semantic query like, I need data on self-serve ARR metrics. And we would fetch all of the column descriptions, all of the table descriptions, and other metadata in Unity Catalog. And then for each data asset, we would feed that to an LLM. We would ask it, hey, rate this on a scale of 0 to 100 in terms of how likely it is to answer the question being asked by this query string, and then return in a sorted list with some context on, how highly was it rated. And this, increased the ability for people to find data effectively using the application, and made it much easier for people who are, less technical, who don't think as much in terms of the kinds of ways of framing questions that would work based on the original app's design to access data more. However, this does illustrate, the limitations of your enterprise data, in the sense that some of our earlier data sets were less well documented. For example, some of them had been built by people at the company before there was a professional data team. And unfortunately, those kinds of data assets were less likely to appear in the search results because the LLM didn't have access to that data when it searched Unity Catalog.
Right. So you were essentially able to self-serve data, give people a way to ask creative questions about that data, but still needed that data expertise to kind of fill in the gaps and fill in the unclean data bits.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you
exactly.
front end too, right?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
And there was like a front end to that as well, so
Yeah.
people can go in and actually serve that
Yep.
themselves.
Yeah. So the front end retool app, you know, big search box, enter a search query, and then return a table with metadata about tables in our Databricks lakehouse, kind of in response to the query.
Yes. Okay. Have you built front ends before, or was that
Oh no, no,
okay?
never built a
Fine.
front end of any kind except for, I mean, like, I built like front ends using BI tools, but they're a little different from kind of the full-fledged app development framework that you have in something like Retool.
Interesting. It's very cool. Okay, just in the interest of time, I'm gonna pause here. So this is kind of where we're at. We've finished our questions for the day, but we do have Q&A. So we can jump into some audience Q&A. Okay, Sam, could you please elaborate a bit on the multimodal unsaturated data, so images and text, for fine-tuning an LLM? What are the inherent problems on training with these types of data?
Mm,
Is it a
that's a really
mouth?
good question. Yeah. Sorry, the multimodal saturated data you said?
Unsaturated data, so images and text.
Unsaturated. Yeah. So that's actually a great question. I personally have never done really much heavy duty data development work on images and text. Um, I wish I could provide better advice, but I'm sure we can find yeah, can connect with me afterwards on LinkedIn, and I can see if I can provide you some help.
Okay. Okay, next question. So when building agents with complex qualitative data, should we build one agent to do a variety of steps or multiple agents that work together? So like one agent to clean the data to make it more useful, or one agent to look for themes, one agent to edit the text, etc.
Yeah. So this is, from what I've gathered, kind of an open question in the industry. We're kind of at early days in terms of identifying what are the best practices. How do you get the most out of agents? Now, from what I've seen, there are cases where breaking out an agent, what would be one agent, into a variety of sub agents that handle more granular tasks, actually, performs much better than having one master agent that is responsible for implementing or executing all the tasks in of itself. And this makes sense on its face. Generally speaking, as I said earlier, the uh, less extraneous information you throw at an LLM, the better it is at making the right decision. That also applies to, the narrower the range of tasks you ask the LLM to be responsible for, the more likely it is also to make the right decision. Um, Now, I'd say the main countervailing force for breaking things out into subagents more frequently is that it becomes more difficult to manage, maintain, and scale. Um, in one sense, it might be more scalable because some subagents you can actually treat like a agentic API. You might have multiple workflows that kind of query the same subagent, but also there's a existing kind of inherent problem in um, troubleshooting and monitoring these systems, and that can become multiplied the more sub agents you create. So if you prioritize performance, you should definitely experiment with building sub agents that handle more narrow tasks. But if you have fewer resources for maintaining, I would say you should probably start by sticking with one super agent.
Right. And you've worked a lot with agent evals. Did you develop evals for our agents feature? Were you working
Oh,
with them?
no, I didn't develop them. I've only worked somewhat with evals. I built a lot of the data we use to measure how customers are using evals. And evals are very critical for effectively building and managing agents.
Right. Okay. So that can kind of help if you are managing multiple agents or building even just a mega agent.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Evals are going to be the key to verifying that breaking it out into kind of smaller subagents is actually more effective.
Okay. This might lead into the next question, which is, can you speak to the memory an agent can access to improve its results over time? And how can we do this using Retool?
Yeah. So I think this is the impression I get. This is kind of a fledgling area of agent development and best practices as well. But in principle, let's say, actually, I'll give you a more straightforward example from a tool that many people might be familiar with. So, Claude Code is a tool that some people use for developing software. One aspect of Claude Code is that you can create memory for it by adding a file called claude.md that provides permanent context that the agent uses every time it makes a decision. So for example, if you're working in a data engineering repository, you might provide context on here are testing standards. Here's how you um, decide which tests to add to this data set. Here's the naming conventions, that kind of thing. And then what's more, if you encounter a shortcoming in terms of Claude Code's ability to write code the way you want, you can actually have Claude Code itself update its Claude MD file. And therefore you have this kind of like self, improving and reinforcing agent.
So
Now
meta.
you can apply that. Oh, sorry, what'd you say, Alicia?
And it's so meta.
Yeah, it gets super meta very quickly. Um, now, what you can do is apply that to, say, a business context with another type of agent. So, one example might be that you are developing a customer support automation agent. And when the agent ingests a ticket or triggers because a new ticket was submitted by a customer, there might be things that you want to have future agent invocations remember about how to interact with that customer effectively. Perhaps, this customer doesn't like being contacted via email, um, stuff like that. And so what you would want to do is set up first, identify what system you're going to use to track um, this memory. So you might set up a database where you store, some summary string about on a per customer level about how to interact with this customer effectively. And then you create a tool for the agent so that every time the agent receives a ticket, it checks, do I have anything in my memory store that pertains to this customer? If so, fetch it and load that into my context. If not, proceed as normal. There's a lot of ways you can kind of architect this, but the same idea, it's the same basic idea, like identify something the agent needs to know in the future, next time it runs, or another time that it runs, create a system where it can fetch that context when it runs again, and then help it decide what to do with that information.
Right. So kind of building those tools around your agents, workflows, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any advice on how to reduce LLM token consumption?
Mm, that's an interesting question. Hmm. Uh, you know, that's actually not an aspect of this that I've looked at in a lot of depth.
Mm.
I mean, one general approach can be using a concept called compaction. And this is functionally a kind of memory process where you ask the LLM periodically to summarize the text that's or other tokens that are in its context window in a much more concise format, then start a new chat where the context provided in the new chat is the summary of your previous discussions. But there's a lot of different techniques for that. I'd say that's traditionally something that for example, at Retool, more focused on by the product engineers who are building our AI products and really want to get the best value for our customers.
Right. Yeah, which I think is why we make sure to expose a lot of that information so that you can
Yeah,
keep an eye on it. Yeah.
yeah.
Evaluate.
Shout out to the Retool Agents product, which has really cool observability features that you can use to track token usage by your agents on your keys.
Yes. If any of you have been to a webinar, I'm sure you know who Kent is. We all love Kent.
Yes.
Okay, can you elaborate a little bit more on implementing data governance for AI apps? And are there any tools or patterns that are already established that we should be aware of?
Yeah. Um, so again, I think this is a place where best practices are still being kind of figured out. Now, there's a couple different perspectives or ways to think about this question as well. So, one question is, how do we think about the governance of the data that's input into our LLM from an external system? So, for example, the tools that are used by an agent to fetch information, or the vector stores that a RAG app uses to answer questions. Um, I think in this situation, generally the tools and techniques are pretty similar to like a traditional data governance system. You might, kind of think about the LLM or the service accounts that an LLM uses to access this data as kind of like one of the accounts you pay the most attention to. Um, the principle of least permissions is going to be even more important when you're talking about a system that could be kind of like, um, a uh, polymath toddler who knows how to write whatever code it wants or fetch whatever data it wants, but doesn't understand enough about the world to know which information it shouldn't divulge or which actions are, you know, um, inappropriate to take based on the powers it has. Uh, it's kind of like the one account that you really want to make sure you get the permissioning exactly right, and even the permissioning on who can kind of make changes to the application itself. So another aspect of this is thinking about how do we manage the data that is input by humans or users to a AI system. Um, this comes with potentially a lot of privacy and other concerns that can make this data different from other types of data. Um, yeah, if you're talking about the data it's getting from, say, your data warehouse, generally you're going to hopefully be making sure that PII or other sensitive information isn't being sent to your LLM. However, you can't, stop a human from just telling your AI chatbot that what its address is and its birth date or its social security number. So I'm less of an expert on this area, but there are emerging tools like Brain Trust that allow you to kind of walk that fine balance of tracking what is the data that humans have entered into or introduced to our systems. How has that caused our systems to behave? While also making sure you ensure that only people who should have access to this information have access, and that sensitive information is kind of removed before it's exposed to people.
Right. Um, okay, the chat is we got a lot of questions coming in. Okay,
Well,
so do you have any opinions on MCP or kind of model context protocol?
Yeah. So it's interesting. At Retool, we have a lot of in-house tools that we've built for our agents platform. And so, I've had a lot of experience kind of looking at and working with those tools. However, we also made sure that we added MCP support to our agents product because it is clearly, at the very least, a strong candidate for, the leading way to kind of manage the tools that you provide to an LLM. I think MCP is very promising in terms of being open source, very auditable, easy to kind of customize or fork if needed, and a kind of really impressive collaboration between competing companies in the space to create a shared toolkit that anyone can use. Actually, before I proceed, I guess to make sure it was on the same page, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It's open source software that you can use to define tools for agents. It comes out of the box with a large number of connectors that you can, configure to connect to your system. So, for example, I believe it comes with a Salesforce connector out of the box, um, and it's standardized between like OpenAI, Anthropic, maybe XAI. It's like portable between models, which makes it, super powerful. Now, I have seen some concerns about um, MCP, some of the limitations potentially of the MCP implementation. There might be kind of the like lowest common denominator tools out of the box that you get for each connector, which might not meet all of your business use cases. Um, and I've also believe, I might have seen some concerns about like security or governance in some of the connectors in MCP, but I don't remember the details if that's the case. But very promising in principle.
Okay, nice. And do you think that the future of AI lays in sort of querying raw data or in working with a more curated knowledge base?
Mm. So it's really tough to say because the future of the underlying technologies is very uncertain. Um, I'd say, let's say we achieve super intelligence, like some people forecast in the next several years. At that point, actually, maybe it doesn't matter how you architected your data. The super intelligence will rewrite it to its own ends. But um, the underlying idea I'm getting at is if these systems get to a place where they're able to independently make reliably good decisions despite having a lot of information to parse, then querying, less curated, more raw data might become the most effective way of running the systems. You might be able to just say like, hey, here's the database, kind of have at it. Here's the documentation, figure it out. But for the time being, in the foreseeable future, curated data is the name of the game, in my opinion. Um, Here's an example. Um, so I had a stakeholder who uh, really wanted to ask an LLM questions, kind of like broad questions about, asking LLM to analyze really large amounts of unstructured data. And I set it up, and the AI wasn't actually able to provide meaningful insight because it's too overwhelmed with context, and it just kind of ended up providing these basic platitudes about the data it provided that didn't really add any insight. Yeah, I have to be a little, can't get into too much detail about what exactly I was working on, but suffice to say that these systems really don't perform well if you provide them a lot of context, a lot of information. In order to really be valuable and to make it past that like proof of concept stage to a real production application, you need to give it a very well defined narrow task and very well defined narrow information to use to like execute or make decisions about that task.
So working with that problem, did you approach that from more of a prompt angle, or were you going at it from more of a data angle of how can I scrape and grab the data that I need and then kind
Mm,
of, yeah, how did you approach that?
yeah. So I approached that from a data angle. So, my role was okay, how do we architect a data set and then architect the system we use to pass this context to an LLM so that someone can ask questions of the LLM. So it's functionally kind of like a RAG app built on some like custom architecture. So there's really interesting questions if you get into architecting data for AI of how do you efficiently um, summarize the information, this unstructured information, and then pass it to an LLM while still staying within your context window and not providing, too much context or not, not wasting tokens by repeating the same information over again.
That's nice. Um, I'm also looking at the chat here. Okay, so here's an interesting question. What kind of company is best positioned to benefit from your offerings? I might be able to answer this one. Supposing a company uses real-time data-heavy workflows and in-house solutions compared to the more standard tools like Zendesk and Salesforce, what kind of support can Retool give to help integrate such workflows, if that's supported? So we like to say that Retool is data agnostic. So if you are exposing those workflows through an API, or if you're storing the information in a database, that is something that you could connect and store within Retool and use within Retool. So what kind of companies are best positioned? I think anywhere from people who are trying to go from prototype to a production application, or even enterprise customers who need that built-in security and governance and even like source control and auditability. There's a range of needs that Retool can fit. And with whatever data you're working with, we can connect to that and you will have governance over that. We talked a lot about governance. I think that's one of the main benefits of using Retool is you have, instead of having to manage all of these API keys and doing it in separate tabs, which I know we all have crazy tab windows, you can do that within the Retool platform. And it makes it really easy to keep under control who's using what, who has access to what, which APIs you're working with. So yes, even if it's custom workflows, that is supported.
Yeah, I would add, in some ways, you might be a better candidate for Retool, or you might get some benefits that other types of Retool customers don't, because you own the system that you're connecting to entirely. And then you can kind of tailor the like affordances of, say, the API or whatever system you need to connect to match whatever you need in Retool. So that could actually be a really great fit.
Yes. Yes. Okay, gonna wrap up really quickly. Oh, before that, my favorite question, Sam, what specific brand and shade of black nail polish will maximize my ability for data science this hard?
Huh. I wonder, was the person who asked this question named Mitch? Um, great question. I don't know. My wife and I got manicures last week. I don't know the brand. She actually kind of did she kind of chose for me. I can find out for you though if you need to. I'm on LinkedIn. Message me, just say you need information about black nail polish.
Oh, perfect. That was Mitch. Love it.
That was
Oh,
not Mitch's question, to my surprise.
okay. One more. One more question. What is something that excites you the most about this new world of AI? And then we'll wrap up.
Mm, that's an interesting question. Um, So I'd say, the most exciting thing is possibility of kind of like blowing open what teams can do and accomplish. And kind of like some ways maybe muddying the waters between traditional job titles. Might be that software engineers need to become more data engineers and data analysts to become like truly effective at building the best AI applications. Or it might be that data scientists start becoming, more like backend engineers in certain ways in order to deliver AI applications. Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how that goes.
Right. Yeah, the industry is shifting a lot. A lot. Okay, well, Sam, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise. Yeah, you are so full of knowledge. It's just amazing to hear you talk.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
and yeah,
Glad to sit down and chat.
it's great. Thank you everyone for coming. Also, for those of you who don't know, we are also hosting a live summit coming up in October 7th. We're hosting it in San Francisco, so that's super exciting. Daniel's going to drop a link in the chat, so if anyone is interested in joining and attending, we would love to see you there. There's going to be a lot of great sessions, a lot of great conversations, good people. Um, and we will follow up with a link to this video recording. And please feel free to connect with both Sam and I on LinkedIn. Reach out if you have any questions. And Sam, everyone loves the nail polish. Love it. Um,
I'll
yeah,
make sure my wife knows and that my manicure place knows next time I go in.
write a good Yelp review for sure. Okay, thank you everyone. And yeah, look forward to connecting soon.
Have a good day, guys.